1930, an entire class of 50 indigenous students vanished without explanation from a boarding school in Arizona. Their disappearance was never solved, buried in dusty case files, hidden behind silence and time. But more than 4 decades later, a newly elected sheriff would stumble upon something everyone else had missed, a detail so vital it could finally unravel the mystery that haunted Red Harvest for 45 years. It was the summer of 1975, and the sun scorched the quiet border town of Red Harvest, Arizona, a place that looked like time had simply stopped. Once home to a federal boarding school in the early 1900s, the town had deteriorated through the decades, weighed down by economic struggle and long-standing tension. The school had closed years ago, but the damage lingered, a town divided, broken, and barely hanging on. Sheriff Walter Claiborne, 48 and only months into the job, stood in a narrow alley that reeked of rust and heat. In front of him were 2 lifeless bodies, indigenous children, no older than 12, their hands showing clear signs of resistance. Someone had tried to fight back. As Walter examined the scene, his hands trembled. He'd seen a lot during his years in law enforcement, but this was different. This was personal, and far too familiar. Snapping photos with the department's aging camera, Walter couldn't shake the sense that this wasn't just another tragic crime. Red Harvest had become a tinderbox. Tension between indigenous residents and law enforcement had hit a breaking point. As old institutions closed, crime rose. Many kids ended up on the streets, overlooked and vulnerable. Walter marked the evidence on the ground with chalk, his stomach churning at the sight. "How many more like this?" he whispered. "How many families never got answers?" Turning to his deputy, Martinez, he muttered, "I need a minute." Martinez gave a silent nod. "Take your time, Sheriff." Walter walked to his cruiser, every step crunching over shattered glass. The drive back to the station was a blur, every red light replaying the same haunting image of those young faces. The sheriff's office, an aging adobe building on Main Street, felt heavier that day. Inside, Deputy Carl Peterson walked in with 2 coffees. "Tough scene, huh?" he said, setting a cup down. "Don't dwell on it, Walt. You'll get used to it. We all do." Walter didn't look up. "I hope I never do, but I need to get stronger. This town's not going to fix itself." Carl gave a half shrug and muttered something that stopped Walter cold. "This won't change until they learn to live like we do." Then he walked out, leaving Walter in stunned silence. The words echoed, not just in the room, but in the culture he'd inherited. He couldn't ignore it anymore. Later that evening, he walked down the narrow hallway to the records archive. The air was thick with dust and forgotten stories. He scanned the shelves for files tied to indigenous victims, anything that might form a pattern. Hours passed, and still nothing concrete. Then, in the far corner, he noticed a faded wooden door labeled Pre-1940 Storage. The handle was stuck, but the frame had rotted. One push and it gave way. Inside was a box blanketed in cobwebs. Walter pulled it down, coughing as dust exploded into the air. The label was barely visible. 1930, Missing Persons, Federal Inquiry. He took it to his desk and opened the lid with care. What he found inside stunned him. Case files, dozens of them, and all pointed to a single event: the complete disappearance of an entire class of indigenous students from Red Harvest Federal Boarding School. Gone from the records, with no closure, no follow-up, no justice. Walter had heard whispers of it before. His own grandfather had been the original investigator, but nothing had ever come of it. Now, looking at the files laid across his desk, he noticed something: a black and white photograph. The missing children, standing in uniform lines in front of the school building, their expressions unreadable, their story unfinished. And finally, someone was ready to listen. The photograph haunted Walter, not just for the solemn faces of the children, but for something almost hidden in the background. A moving truck, faded and weather-worn, barely legible. Yet there it was, S.H. Styles Moving Company. Walter squinted. That company still operated locally. He had seen their trucks rolling through Red Harvest just days ago. As he stared at the photo, Deputy Miguel Herrera passed the open door, then stepped back. "What are you doing with that old case?" he asked. Walter looked up. "After what we saw today, I needed to understand the history. This 1930 case, 50 indigenous children disappearing, I can't shake the feeling it's connected. These families have suffered for so long. Someone has to care," Miguel sighed. "Walt, it's a dead end. Focus on the now. We've got enough going wrong today." He paused. "Oh, and don't forget, you've got that meeting with Mayor CR. No idea what it's about, but probably something tied to the election." Walter blinked. "Right, thanks." He carefully secured the case files in his drawer, locking them up. Still, that photo and the company name stayed with him like a thorn under the skin. Something about S.H. Styles didn't sit right. He straightened his uniform, grabbed his hat, and headed out, the sound of his footsteps echoing through the hallway. The late afternoon heat pressed against him like a furnace. City Hall, just next door, stood proud with its Spanish colonial design, a relic of the past. Walter crossed the sun-baked courtyard, his thoughts still circling those missing children and that faint image of a moving truck in the photo. It couldn't be a coincidence. As he reached for the office door, Walter froze. Voices leaked through the thick oak. He'd forgotten to knock. Mayor CR's voice boomed from inside. "Excellent work, as always. This new contract will benefit both the town and your company. Your consistency over the years says it all." A second voice replied, smooth and composed. "We appreciate the opportunity, Mayor. S.H. Styles Moving Company is proud to support your leadership and your vision for Red Harvest." Walter's breath caught. The name again. S.H. Styles, the same company from the photograph, still in business, still tied to those in power. Before he could fully collect himself, the door swung open. Standing before him was a sharply dressed man in his 50s, confident, polished. Behind him, Mayor CR looked up from his desk. "Sheriff Claiborne," the mayor said with a wide smile. "Didn't hear you knock." Walter straightened. "My apologies, sir. Didn't mean to interrupt." The other man extended a hand. "No trouble at all. We were just finishing." The mayor gestured between them. "Sheriff, meet Simon H. Styles, Jr., owner of S.H. Styles Moving Company, one of our town's top business partners." Walter shook the man's hand, noting the pristine manicure, the glint of a gold watch. "Pleasure to meet you, Sheriff," Styles said smoothly. "Heard good things about you." The mayor added with a chuckle, "We'll be seeing each other at the club, Simon." "Looking forward to it, Douglas." Styles nodded and exited, his footsteps fading down the marble corridor. Left alone with the mayor, Walter glanced at the portraits on the wall. Former mayors of Red Harvest. One stood out, Franklin W. Krantz, from the 1930s, the current mayor's grandfather, the time of the disappearances. Mayor CR closed the door and gestured to a chair. "Have a seat, Walter. We need to talk about the election." Walter sat, the memory of the conversation he'd overheard still fresh. "I need stability in this town," the mayor began, his tone serious. "These recent crimes, especially those involving the indigenous community, they're causing concern. We need visible change, now." "We're investigating thoroughly," Walter replied carefully. "Not good enough," the mayor interrupted. "We need results, this month, and I have a solution." He paused. "Relocation. S.H. Styles is going to help us move a portion of the indigenous population. We just need your department's cooperation to make sure it goes smoothly." Walter stared. "You're suggesting a mass relocation?" "Exactly," CR confirmed. "We've arranged everything. They'll be moved somewhere more appropriate, peaceful, a place where they won't cause unrest." "Which settlement?" Walter asked slowly. The mayor waved him off. Details like that aren't important to you. What matters is law and order. Your department ensures things stay quiet. Can I count on you, Sheriff? Walter felt trapped. Refusing could cost him his position and any influence he had left to protect these people. But agreeing felt like betrayal. I'll need to review the legal basis, he said carefully. The framework is solid, the mayor replied sharply. No room for debate. This is for the good of Red Harvest. Better living conditions for them, peace of mind for our citizens. A win-win, the mayor said, rising from his chair, signaling the end of the meeting. This stays between us, Walter, but I expect real progress. I want your strategy on my desk by the end of the week. Walter stood slowly. Understood, Mayor. Good man. I knew I could count on you. Walter stepped out into the blinding heat of the late afternoon, the shadows growing longer across the courtyard. The name S.H. Stiles Moving Company pulsed in his thoughts. The same company linked to the mass disappearance of 1930, now resurfacing in the mayor's quiet plan for relocation. And that oil painting in City Hall, the mayor's grandfather, who'd been in office when those 50 children were never seen again. As Walter pushed open the station doors, his grandfather's voice echoed in memory. Sometimes the real criminals wear suits and shake your hand. He moved with new purpose. Whatever was happening in Red Harvest, whatever plan was unfolding, he was going to stop it. 2 murdered children already haunted his conscience. The 50 who vanished deserved more than silence. Deputy Herrera was waiting inside Walter's office, surrounded by folders and exhausted from the long day. Just wrapped the interview with the kid we found at the scene, Herrera said, not wasting time. Figured you'd want the update. Walter sank into his chair. Go ahead. 15 years old, Herrera said, flipping open his notes. Name's Thomas Bay, Indigenous, blood on his hands. His fingerprints were on the knife. Looks like the weapon. 15, Walter repeated quietly. A boy, barely older than the victims. That's not the strange part, Herrera continued. He was in shock, barely coherent, kept mumbling about a very hot place. Red doors, something underground, like a barn. Wouldn't, or couldn't, say where. Walter leaned forward. Was he scared? Could he have been a victim too? Herrera hesitated. Could be, but the evidence is stacked against him. His prints were everywhere. No witnesses saw anyone else. Walter shook his head. They don't do this, not to their own, not children. Maybe, Herrera said, but the pressure's building. Everyone's looking for a quick answer, and this kid's an easy one. Silence followed. Walter felt the familiar ache, that sinking knowledge that justice here too often came second to closure. Where is he now? Walter asked. Cell 3, listed as a suspect. I want to speak with him. I wouldn't, not yet, Herrera advised. He's rattled. Still not making sense. Give it till morning. Walter nodded. Just let me see the interview report. Herrera handed over a folder and checked the wall clock. We'll pick this up tomorrow. Don't stay too long. When he left, Walter pulled the report closer and opened it alongside the 1930 files. He studied the boy's disjointed statement, fragmented descriptions of heat, darkness, red doors, eerie, almost dreamlike. Then he turned to the old files, and his breath caught. The official records claimed 3 of the 50 missing students had been recovered, listed as relocated, but attached were interviews, and 2 of those survivors described being held in a very hot, dark place. One even mentioned red doors. Walter's hand trembled as he scribbled down notes. This wasn't imagination. The parallels were too clear. Digging deeper into the school's archives, he found something else. S.H. Stiles Moving Company had handled all the school's transportation needs, not just supplies, but field trips, Every single one. Why would a moving company, not a bus service, be transporting children? He looked again at the class photo. The children stood in stiff rows, dressed in uniform. The caption, Annual Field Trip, May 1930. But in the background, no school bus. Just that same company truck. Something wasn't right. Walter's gut twisted. He opened the phone directory and dialed a number he knew by heart. After 4 rings, County Recorder's Office, Rebecca speaking. Becca, it's Walter Claiborne. Sorry for calling this late. Her voice softened. Walter, what are you doing still working? I need a favor, and it's urgent. She sighed. You always say that. This time I mean it. I need every property and asset owned by S.H. Styles Moving Company. Buildings, vehicles, anything. Permits, titles, transfers. Everything you've got. You know I can't just hand over records without the right request, especially this late. It's about today's murders, Walter said, voice low. Those 2 girls, I think there's a connection, and not just to the present. Something that goes back decades. There was a long pause on the line. Then Rebecca said softly, Go on. Rebecca had known Walter since high school, and she could tell this wasn't just another hunch. Fine, she said after a pause. But just this once. The office is closing now, but come by first thing tomorrow. I'll have everything ready. Thank you, Becca. I owe you. You owe me dinner, she replied, at that new steakhouse, and a real explanation. Deal. After hanging up, Walter let out a long breath and sank into his chair. His eyes burned from hours of reading. His shoulders ached with exhaustion, but the weight he carried now wasn't just physical. The picture was forming, slowly, painfully, but it was coming together. S.H. Styles Moving Company, the disappearances of 1930, the mayor's quiet plan to relocate families, Thomas Bay's terrified ramblings about red doors and unbearable heat, and now 2 girls dead in an alley. It was all part of the same thread, and Walter could feel it tightening. He locked the case files away, switched off the lights, and stepped into the cool desert night. But even as the darkness settled over Red Harvest, his thoughts kept circling one question. What kind of place stays hidden for 45 years, unchanged? And what horrors might it still be hiding? Driving through the near-empty streets, Walter's headlights swept across shuttered shops and cracked sidewalks. After dark, the town always felt different, more secretive, as if the shadows themselves were holding their breath. Then, movement. A figure darted into the street, lit up by the headlights. Walter slammed the brakes, tires screeching. A teenage boy, barefoot, ragged, maybe 14, sprinted down the road, eyes wide with panic. His face was streaked with dust and fear. Walter jumped out. "Hey!" he called. "Are you okay? Do you need help?" The boy looked back but didn't stop. If anything, he ran harder, his bare feet smacking the pavement, gasping for air. "I'm the sheriff!" Walter shouted. "I can help!" But the boy weaved between parked cars, desperate to get away. Walter gave chase. His longer stride was closing the distance. Then, 2 men stepped from the alley. It happened fast. They moved with practiced efficiency. One man grabbed the boy, thick arms pinning him. The other quickly tied his wrists. The child fought, crying out in a language Walter didn't recognize. But the fear in his voice was unmistakable. "What the hell is going on?" Walter shouted, hand moving toward his sidearm. The larger man turned slowly. His face was scarred, his tone casual. "Didn't your boss tell you? We're cleaning the streets." Walter flinched at the coldness in his words. The mayor had spoken about relocation. But this, "I need to see your authorization," Walter said, voice sharp. The second man, younger, with ice in his eyes, spat on the ground. "You're asking the wrong questions, Sheriff. You should be helping us gather them. Orders came down today." Together, they dragged the boy toward a truck parked nearby. Walter followed, and when he saw the company logo, his stomach turned. S.H. Stiles Moving Company. "Authorization," he repeated. With a sigh, the scarred man pulled a folded packet from his jacket. Walter read the papers under a streetlight. They were official, stamped, signed, by Mayor C.R., S.H. Stiles Management, even Simon H. Stiles Jr. himself. Then the truck doors opened, and Walter's breath caught. Inside were at least 20 Indigenous children, wide-eyed, silent, afraid, crammed together in the dark like they didn't matter. "This is the last one," the younger man said, pushing the boy inside. "Where are you taking them?" Walter demanded. "There's housing. Temporary. A permanent site's almost ready," came the reply. Walter's pulse pounded. Every instinct told him this was wrong. But if he tried to stop them now, he'd be going against orders and lose any hope of investigating from the inside. And these kids needed someone watching, someone they could still count on. "I'll escort you," he said. The men hesitated, then nodded. Walter returned to his patrol car and followed. The truck pulled out of Red Harvest, heading east, then north, far from any place Walter recognized. With every passing mile, the roads narrowed. Civilization faded into desert, scrub brush, jagged rocks, and emptiness. He checked the odometer. They had driven nearly 2 hours, and still nothing. No town, no settlement, just silence and a growing sense of dread. The truck's brake lights flared suddenly. Without signaling, it turned off the main road and rumbled into a dusty side path. Walter slowed, following cautiously. Through the swirling dirt kicked up by the tires, he saw it, a small, isolated settlement, barely lit, forgotten by time. Straight ahead stood a 2-story building, rectangular, utilitarian, surrounded by other structures of similar size and design. But this one was different. A chain-link fence wrapped around it, crowned with barbed wire. Only one entrance. Harsh floodlights bathed the compound in an unforgiving glare. It didn't look like temporary housing. It looked like a prison. "This place is too small for this many kids," Walter muttered as the truck doors swung open and the children inside began to stir. "Not our concern," the scarred man said bluntly, hopping down. "Who runs this facility?" Walter asked. "The government? A private contractor? S.H. Stiles?" The younger man cut in, annoyed. "Does it matter? We're not paid to ask. We pick up the kids, bring them here. That's it." Walter watched as the children filed out one by one, stiff from the long ride, moving like shadows. The younger ones were crying quietly, too scared to speak. Some of the older ones tried to comfort them, but their own faces were pale with fear. Then a woman emerged, heavy-set, stern, clipboard in hand. She began checking names mechanically, her tone devoid of warmth. 23, she announced when the last child stepped down. "All present." The 2 men turned to Walter. "You can head back now, Sheriff," one said. "Your part's done." Walter nodded slowly, but his mind was racing. "Tomorrow," he told himself. "Tomorrow I meet with Rebecca. I'll get the full records. I'll ask the mayor the questions he won't want to answer. But tonight, all he could do was observe." Through the fence, he saw the children being handed off to another man waiting inside, silent, expressionless. As they disappeared into the darkened building, the boy who had run from Walter earlier turned back. For a brief second, their eyes met through the metal fence. The boy didn't speak. He didn't need to. His eyes said everything, and then the gate slammed shut. A lock clicked. The 2 men climbed back into their truck, and Walter returned to his patrol car. His grip on the steering wheel was tight, his jaw clenched. Whatever this place was, it wasn't about helping children. This wasn't relocation. This was containment. He started the engine and pulled away, watching in his rearview mirror as the S.H. Styles truck turned in the opposite direction, heading even deeper into the desert. A few miles later, a flickering neon sign appeared ahead, a small gas station, the only sign of life for miles. Walter pulled in, hoping for coffee, maybe food, anything to clear his head before the long drive back to Red Harvest. Inside the convenience store, the lights buzzed overhead. Behind the counter stood an older man with weathered hands and a calm, kind expression. "Evening, Sheriff," the clerk said. "You're far from your usual patrol zone." "Just passing through," Walter said, grabbing a prepackaged sandwich, chips, and the biggest cup of coffee they had. He added a fishing magazine, something to give his mind a moment's rest. Back in the car, he rolled down the windows and let the desert air in. He ate slowly, sipping the bitter coffee, trying to settle his nerves. But then, movement. In the rear-view mirror, he saw something shifting in the shadows near the edge of the parking lot. A figure, low, cautious, hiding. Walter stepped out, instincts alert. The figure moved into view. The same boy, the one who had been tied up, dragged into the truck. But now, he was free. His wrists bore fresh rope burns. His feet were bleeding. He was still barefoot, still afraid. But this time, he didn't run. Instead, he sprinted toward Walter. "You... police?" The boy gasped in broken English. "You good?" Before Walter could answer, the boy flung open the passenger door and jumped in. Wait. Walter scrambled back to the driver's seat. "How did you escape?" he asked, stunned. The boy was shaking. "Help friends, you drive." "Why me?" Walter asked, confused. "You ran from me before." The boy looked at him hard, then said simply, "You good. I know." Walter looked around. The gas station was quiet. No one seemed to be following. The fenced facility was only a few miles behind them, but everything was still. Against his better judgment, Walter started the engine. The boy's stomach growled audibly. Walter handed over the rest of his sandwich and chips. The boy devoured it all, even the cold coffee. Then, suddenly, the boy pointed ahead. "There," he said urgently. Walter looked up. The S.H. Styles truck was returning. But something was wrong. In the back of the truck, he saw them, the same children, still there, still inside, still huddled, still terrified. "They're loading them again," Walter muttered, squinting in disbelief. The same truck that had just delivered the children to that barbed wire compound was now pulling away, headed in a new direction. Beside him, the boy grabbed his arm with urgency, pointing at the departing vehicle. "Friends, please, follow." "Save." Walter hesitated. Every part of his training screamed, "Return to town, report, stay in protocol." But looking at the boy, barefoot, bruised, and desperate, he knew, if he let him go, he'd vanish into the shadows again. And this time, there might be no second chance. "All right," Walter said, starting the engine. "Let's see where they're really taking them." He trailed the truck at a safe distance, lights off, letting the faint red glow of the tail lights guide him through the desert night. The paved road thinned, twisted, then disappeared altogether. Civilization gave way to wilderness. Tall cacti loomed like watchmen in the moonlight. The only sounds were the tires against gravel and the occasional gust of wind. The boy didn't relax. He remained alert, his eyes fixed on the vehicle ahead. 30 minutes passed. Then, the truck slowed, turned off the main trail. Walter followed cautiously. Ahead, a massive, rusted building emerged from the dark. A warehouse, long abandoned by appearances. A faded metal sign near the gate read, "Shial's Moving Equipment Storage Facility." Walter pulled off the path, parking behind a formation of desert rocks. He turned to the boy. "I didn't think they'd bring them here," he said quietly. "This isn't housing. It's a warehouse. I can't stop them. I'm alone. No radio, no support." The boy's eyes filled with tears. "Please, help." "I'll come back. I promise," Walter said. "Tomorrow I'll check records. I'll get back up. I'll—" But before he could finish, a figure appeared at the warehouse entrance, walking straight toward them. Walter stepped out, doing his best to project calm authority. The man was middle-aged, his build soft, more suited to paperwork than fieldwork. "Sheriff," the man greeted without surprise. "Didn't expect company tonight. I manage the facility here." His gaze shifted to the patrol car, where the boy sat frozen in fear. "Ah, you found one of ours. We were wondering where he'd gone. Thank you for bringing him back." Walter's stomach turned. One of ours? He was stranded, miles from backup, no legal cause to intervene, and the man clearly knew it. With no other option, Walter opened the passenger door and helped the boy out. The boy turned to him, eyes full of betrayal. Then he shouted, "Red door! Barn, red door!" The manager's demeanor changed in an instant. "Ignore him," he said coldly. "He's confused. Heat exhaustion. Delusional." "I'll be heading back to town," Walter replied, forcing his voice to stay steady. "That's best," the man agreed. "If you've got questions, talk to the mayor or visit our downtown office." Walter stood still, memorizing everything, the layout, the surroundings, the sign. As the man took the boy by the arm and began walking him across the dusty road, Walter climbed back into his vehicle but didn't start it. Something was deeply wrong here. The boy stumbled on the gravel, his bare feet no match for the terrain. Walter watched, tension tightening in his chest. Every instinct screamed that something terrible was happening. Halfway to the warehouse, the boy suddenly broke free, sprinting wildly in the opposite direction. The manager swore and gave chase. Despite his flabby build, he moved fast. In seconds, he caught the boy and, without hesitation, struck him across the back of the head. The child collapsed. Walter's hand hovered over his weapon, trembling with restraint. The man lifted the unconscious boy effortlessly and threw him over his shoulder like discarded luggage, carrying him the rest of the way inside. This was no relocation. This was something else entirely. As the warehouse door swung open, Walter rolled down his window, straining to hear. For a long moment, nothing. Then he heard it, distant, muffled, screams, children's voices, shouting, crying, begging. Walter's blood ran cold. Whatever was happening behind those walls, it wasn't safe, it wasn't legal, and it wasn't what the mayor claimed. He'd handed that boy straight back into something monstrous. He gripped the steering wheel, knuckles white with fury and guilt. He couldn't storm the place alone. That would get him killed and silence the story. He needed proof, he needed support, and most of all, he needed to act fast, because if he didn't, those children might vanish just like the 50 had in 1930. Walter started the engine and drove. The drive back was a blur. Walter's mind raced as fast as the patrol car tearing across the desert. He wasn't just chasing answers now, he was chasing time. The corruption ran deep in Red Harvest, but not everyone was part of it. There had to be people who would stand beside him, people who still believed in justice. He pushed the accelerator harder, the engine groaning in protest. His hands gripped the wheel, not from fear, but fury. The glow of the gas station appeared on the horizon like a lighthouse in the dark. Walter skidded into the lot, dust billowing around the tires, and burst through the door, startling the half-asleep clerk behind the counter. "I need to use your phone," he said. "Now. It's official business." The clerk blinked and pointed toward the wall-mounted payphone without a word. Walter lifted the receiver, his fingers dialing a number from memory. 1 ring, 2, 3. "Hello? Miguel, it's me. Sorry to wake you. I need you to listen. This can't wait." There was a pause, then the rustle of Herrera sitting up in bed. "Walter? What time is it? Where are you?" "No time. Just hear me out. The relocation. It's not what we thought. I followed the trucks. They took the kids to a warehouse, a facility. S.H. Styles owns it. I saw them beat a child outside the entrance. And inside, I heard screams. Children, Miguel. Herrera's voice dropped. You went in alone? That's not the point, Walter snapped. Something's going on. Something terrible. The mayor, S.H. Styles, they're involved in something way darker than anyone thinks. There was a heavy silence. Tell me everything you saw, Herrera said, now fully awake, voice low but sharp. Walter steadied himself. The boy, the one who escaped, they hit him in plain sight. No hesitation. If they'll do that with a cop watching, what are they doing when no one's around? Miguel, we need a warrant. Fast. Another long pause. You're not crazy, Herrera said finally, and you wouldn't call unless it was real. I'll contact Judge Baines. He owes me. Walter's voice dropped to a whisper. Tell him this could be connected to the 1930 federal case, the missing Indigenous class. Tie it to today's homicides. He'll understand. I'll call you back. Walter hung up and began pacing the small store. The clerk watched nervously as Walter bought another coffee, not because he needed it, but to give his hands something to hold. Minutes passed. Every tick of the clock stretched too long. Every second meant those kids were still inside that place. And then, the phone rang. The clerk answered and handed it over. It's for you. Herrera's voice was firm. We got the green light. Baines signed the warrant. Walter exhaled in relief. Thank God. I'm pulling together a team, tactical. Martinez, Kowalski, Peterson. Good men, ones who won't ask too many questions. We'll meet at your location and move from there. Walter gave him the directions. We're about 30 minutes out from the warehouse. Walter, Herrera said, lowering his voice, you better be right about this. I don't want there to be kids suffering in that place. But if we're wrong, I'm not, Walter said quietly. I heard them, Miguel. I saw what they did to that boy. There was a pause. If you're right, God help those children. We'll be there within the hour. The line went dead. Walter stepped outside. The stars burned bright overhead, cold and indifferent. But Walter Claiborne was not indifferent. He would bring the truth into the light, no matter what it cost him. He leaned against the patrol car and waited, eyes locked on the empty road. And then, headlights. The convoy arrived like a pack of wolves, silent, determined. Walter led the charge, his patrol car at the front, followed by 3 squad cars and a tactical van. No lights, no sirens, only purpose. Herrera rode beside him, checking gear and radio. 8 officers, he confirmed. 4 tactical specialists. If they fight us, we're ready. Let's pray they don't, Walter muttered, though his fingers hovered near his holster. The warehouse loomed ahead, a lifeless structure in the moonlight, its rusted frame swallowing the stars. There were no company markings now, no sign that it belonged to S.H. Styles. Just an anonymous building, hidden in the middle of nowhere. Walter signaled the team to halt. The officers fanned out with precision, surrounding the site. Remember, Herrera said quietly, addressing the team, we have possible minors inside. Use caution. Check your targets. They crept forward, flashlights off, weapons ready, nerves taut. Then, before they could even announce their presence, the front doors burst open. Several men rushed out, and at the front was the warehouse manager Walter had met earlier. What is the meaning of this? The man demanded, waving a set of documents. This is authorized by the mayor. This is a legal operation. Herrera stepped into the beam of a flashlight, badge gleaming. That doesn't matter anymore, he said. We have a warrant. We've received reports of children crying and shouting from within this facility, Herrera stated firmly, stepping forward. And a witness reported violence against a minor. We're executing a lawful search. This is harassment, the warehouse manager protested, his voice rising. You have no right. We have a court order, Herrera interrupted, producing the signed warrant and holding it up. Stand aside. The manager's face turned pale as he scanned the document. After a long, tense silence, he stepped back, allowing the officers to move in. The warehouse was massive, dim, hollow, and cluttered. Dust coated every surface, boxes sat in lopsided stacks, and rusted equipment lay forgotten in corners. It looked like any long-abandoned storage site, but Walter wasn't convinced. "Where are the children?" he demanded, turning to the manager. "I watched them brought here." The man said nothing. His jaw clenched, and the other workers, 4 rough-looking men, exchanged anxious glances. Walter scanned the room, searching for anything that didn't fit. Then he saw it, a box, larger than the rest, wedged against the far wall. Its markings were faint, almost like they'd been deliberately weathered. Walter stepped closer and noticed something crudely painted on the hidden side. A red barn door. Simple, uneven, but unmistakable. "Red door, barn," Walter whispered, remembering the boy's desperate warning. He tapped the surface. The sound was off. Not the hollow thud of cardboard, but the dull knock of wood. "This isn't a real box," Walter called out. "It's plywood, painted to blend in. Get them away from that," the manager shouted. But it was too late. 2 officers moved to restrain him as the tactical team rushed in, clearing away the surrounding boxes. Beneath the false stack was a trap door set into the concrete. A massive padlock held it shut. "Cut it," Herrera ordered. The bolt cutter snapped through the lock with a loud crack. As the trapdoor creaked open, a foul, stagnant stench rose from below. With it came faint sounds, crying, soft whispers, the rustle of bare feet. Walter aimed his flashlight into the hole, and there they were. Dozens of children, eyes wide and hollow, stared up from the shadows. "Oh my God!" someone whispered. "Get them out," Walter said urgently, already climbing down. "Get medical here, now." The team sprang into action, forming a human chain to lift the children up one by one. Some were too weak to walk. Others were frozen in place, eyes darting, unsure if this was real. Walter and Herrera moved quickly, helping the smallest, speaking gently, trying to restore even a sliver of calm. "How many?" Herrera asked, lifting a child who couldn't speak. 30, maybe more," an officer replied. "We're still counting." Outside, the warehouse workers were being arrested without resistance. The manager stood frozen, watching the children emerge in a silent line. His face had gone colorless. He didn't say a word. "This is going to be national news," Herrera murmured to Walter. "This destroys the mayor, S.H. Stiles, all of it." Walter wiped sweat from his brow, his voice low but resolute. "I know most people don't care when the victims are Indigenous kids, but some will. Someone has to." "Let's hope so," Herrera replied, lifting his radio. "Dispatch, we need full medical and forensics units at our location. We have approximately 30 minors in critical condition. Immediate care required." As the last of the children reached the surface, Officer Martinez called from below. "Sheriff, deputy, you need to come down here, now. It's bigger than we thought." Walter and Herrera descended again, weapons drawn, flashlights cutting through the stale air. The space beneath the warehouse was more than a basement. It was a labyrinth, a series of concrete tunnels and chambers carved into the earth, reinforced by hand decades ago. And what they found inside was a nightmare. Crude cells lined the walls, their bars rusted, some with old restraints bolted in place. Rotting mattresses lay on the floor, stained and sunken. The air reeked of suffering. In one corner sat a long-dead generator, its purpose unclear, but whatever it powered, it hadn't been anything good. "This place has been used for decades," Walter said quietly, running his hand along a wall worn smooth by time. "Since the 1930s, maybe longer." At the end of the corridor stood a heavy door, not rusted like the rest, but freshly chained, sealed with a modern lock. Herrera pressed his ear against it. "Someone's inside," he whispered. "I hear movement." The chains were cut. The door creaked open. The stench hit first, sweat, fear, and decay. Then came the light, piercing the dark, revealing two women curled on the floor, gaunt, shaking, shielding their eyes. When one of them saw Walter's badge, she began to weep. "Please," she whispered, her voice hoarse. "Are you real? Are you really here?" Walter dropped to one knee, gently taking her hand. "We're real. You're safe now. What's your name?" "Mary," she said. "Mary Two Rivers." She turned to the other woman. "This is Adeline Running Bird." They looked far older than they should have. Malnourishment had ravaged them. But behind their weariness was something else. Recognition. Memory. Walter hesitated, heart pounding. "Are you connected to the 1930 missing class?" Both women nodded. "We're the last," Adeline said, her voice steady despite the tears. "The only ones left. The others are gone." Walter felt the air leave his lungs. "We'll talk more above ground," he said softly. "Can you walk?" The women looked at the stairs leading up, to air, to sky, to freedom. "We'll crawl if we have to," Mary said. Walter and Herrera supported them as they climbed, step by shaking step, and with each agonizing movement, the nightmare that had been buried for generations began to break open, finally, into the light. The women gripped the railings with trembling hands, pulling themselves upward with sheer determination. "Almost there," Walter whispered, steadying them. "Just a few more steps." When they finally emerged into the warehouse, they collapsed, not from weakness, but from the overwhelming flood of air, space, and freedom. Tears streamed down their faces as they inhaled fresh air for the first time in decades. Even the most hardened officers turned away, eyes stinging with emotion. These weren't just survivors. They were living proof of a nightmare no one had believed still existed. Outside, dawn was breaking. Cool air drifted across the desert as police cruisers lit up the compound in blue and red. Ambulances pulled in one after another, medics rushing to tend to the rescued children. Nearby, the arrested warehouse staff were loaded into vans, wrists bound, expressions vacant. Walter and Herrera guided Mary Two Rivers and Adeline Running Bird to a quiet space near an ambulance. Wrapped in emergency blankets, the women sat side by side on the rear bumper, blinking into the open sky. The world looked vast after so many years in darkness. Walter knelt in front of them, gentle but focused. "Can you tell us what happened?" he asked softly. "That day in 1930. Mary clutched the blanket tighter. Her voice cracked. "It was supposed to be a field trip. They said we were going to visit the state capitol. We were so excited. Most of us had never even left town." Adeline picked up where she left off, her voice steady but distant. "But there was no school bus. Just S.H. Styles moving trucks. We thought it was strange, but the teachers told us it was okay. They drove us here." Mary's voice grew stronger. "They shipped most of the girls out within months, by rail, the boys too. We never saw them again. The ones who stayed," she paused, "they kept us for other reasons. Some played along to survive, pretended to be sick, stayed useful, cleaned, cooked. That's how we made it." Adeline's jaw clenched. "We tried to escape once, in 1935. Made it as far as the town, but back then, the mayor and sheriff were already part of it. No one listened. They dragged us back. That was the last time we tried." She looked at Walter, her eyes shimmering. "Until now." Walter's mind flashed to the file he'd read, the two found girls listed as relocated. It was them. They had never been rescued, only erased. Did you know what S.H. Styles was really doing? Herrera asked carefully. Mary and Adeline exchanged glances. Then Mary nodded. We heard things. Late at night, when the guards thought we were asleep, they trafficked people, took advantage of how little anyone cared about Indigenous children. The racial conflict, the politics, they used it all. It made them rich. Adeline's eyes searched Walter's. How is the world now? Has anything changed? Are our people safe? The two lawmen glanced at one another. Neither wanted to speak the lie, so Walter told the truth. It's better in some ways. Boarding schools are closing, but the pain, the injustice, it's still there, just harder to see. He paused. And S.H. Styles. I'm certain they used their business as a cover for trafficking, for decades, with help from men in power. That's true, Mary said, eyes hard. The town's leaders were always part of it, including the mayor. Who's in office now? Adeline asked. Mayor Douglas R. Krantz, Walter replied. Grandson of Franklin W. Krantz. Their faces darkened instantly. Franklin, Adeline repeated. He was mayor back then. He knew. He had to know. He likely covered it up, Walter said grimly, to protect his name, his family. But now the truth's coming out, Herrera added, and your story can make sure it's heard. Will you testify? Both women sat up straighter. Yes, they said in unison. Herrera nodded. You'll have full protection. Your testimony, combined with the evidence we have now, will be enough to open national investigations. We'll bring this entire operation down. He pulled out his radio. Dispatch, he said into the mic. This is Deputy Herrera. We need warrants prepared immediately. Targets include Simon H. Styles, Jr., Mayor Douglas R. Krantz, and any known associates of S.H. Styles Moving Company. Charges: kidnapping, trafficking, false imprisonment, and criminal conspiracy. Copy that, Deputy, came the reply. Teams are mobilizing. Walter looked around at the scene. Children wrapped in blankets, medics working tirelessly, police securing the area, and felt the weight of decades lifting, if only slightly. I hope this opens people's eyes, he said quietly, to just how much these kids have suffered, just because they weren't born white. Mary reached out and grasped his hand, her grip stronger than he expected. Her eyes locked with his. It's because you didn't look away that we're here now. It means a lot, Mary said quietly, her voice raw with emotion. To see white officers here, helping us. We never thought we'd see the world up here again. We truly believed we would die and disappear down there. Tears slipped down her lined face. But you gave us new life. Herrera placed a hand on Walter's shoulder. This happened because of you, Walt. You're the one who kept reading those files, who wouldn't let it go. The two women turned to him in surprise. You did? Adeline asked softly. You remembered us? Walter's voice caught in his throat. Yes, I was reviewing an active case this morning. 2 young Indigenous girls were murdered, and something in their file led me back to yours, to the old case. But honestly, he paused. It was mostly God who led me here. God and courage, Mary corrected, her voice like a quiet flame. A medic approached gently. We need to examine them properly now, she said. They're malnourished and deeply shaken, but physically, they'll recover. As the women were helped into the ambulance, Walter's eyes scanned the crowd and landed on a familiar face. Ashki, the boy who had trusted him, who had led him here. He was sitting on the ground, a medic checking the bump on his head. Walter walked over slowly, not wanting to startle him. The boy looked up and, despite everything, gave a faint smile. Thank you, Walter said simply, kneeling down beside him. You were brave. The boy sat up taller, pride shining through the exhaustion. Ashki Nez, he said. It means tall boy. It was my grandfather's name. Well, Ashki, Walter said, smiling. You helped save every child here tonight. You're a hero. Ashki shook his head. I only wanted to save my friend, Thomas Bay. We escaped together. It's a long story how we got back to town, but when we did, we saw a man hurting 2 girls. I ran for help, but Thomas didn't. He tried to stop him. Walter leaned in, listening closely. They killed the girls, Ashki said, his voice trembling. And then they pushed the knife into Thomas's hand. When the police came, he was still trying to help, still trying to stop the bleeding. Walter's pen was already moving. The entire testimony connected. The homicide case, the framed boy. It had all started here. Thank you for telling me, Ashki, Walter said seriously. We'll talk more at the station. Thomas is there. He's safe, but he'll need your help. Your voice might be the only one that can clear his name. Ashki nodded solemnly. Walter stood and turned to take in the scene. Children receiving care, officers keeping order, medics working with quiet urgency, all of them survivors, all of them deserving better than what the world had given them. You're going to see your families again, Walter told the group nearby, and we'll make sure you're protected. This won't ever happen again, not here. Herrera joined him, watching the ambulances prep for departure. Reporters are already on their way, he said. I've called in every contact I have. We're not hiding this. Good, Walter replied. The world needs to see. The 2 men stood in silence for a moment, letting the stillness speak. In the east, the sky had begun to shift, pale oranges and pinks coloring the horizon. The warehouse, now empty, looked almost ordinary in the dawn light, but Walter knew better. Its shadows would follow him for the rest of his life. It's not over, Herrera said quietly. All of this, it's just one layer of the sickness. There's still hate, still corruption, still too many people willing to look the other way. Walter nodded. I know, but maybe this is the start. Maybe this is where we stop pretending not to see. Maybe now, people will look at these kids and see who they really are. They deserve more than just survival, Herrera added. They deserve dignity, respect, the chance to live. Walter glanced toward Ashki, who was now being helped into an ambulance. The boy turned back, eyes searching, and gave Walter one last wave. Walter raised a hand in return, the weight of everything that had happened pressed down on him. But beneath it all was something else. Hope. Justice had taken its first breath tonight, and the work was only beginning. Herrera clapped him on the shoulder. Come on, we've got arrests to make, and a town to wake up. The 2 men walked toward their vehicles as the first true rays of sunlight lit up the desert. The darkness was lifting, and the world, at last, was watching.